See, it said that. So it's automatically doing. It's, I think, louder. Everybody, good morning and welcome to Choe Khor Sum Ling again this Sunday morning for a teaching by Venerable Legden on happiness. And this is called Happiness Series. And it's, I think we've passed 5 or 6 sessions already in this.
This is the
ninth session. And it's a very interesting series, and welcome to you all. And thank you for spending your day with us. And thank you, Venerable Legden, for taking time and coming here and teaching us. Thank you all for joining in from wherever you are.
Good to see everyone this morning. I think that we turned on. I don't know if we really need. Good to see everyone this morning. Just before we begin, a little note, maybe especially if there are some people that are new or not used to it and been out of the center for a while. Tradition in a teaching center is usually the teacher wouldn't be hanging out with you before class. They'd be in their own room or something, you know. Well, obviously we don't have that space here. But when a teaching begins, you generally want to stand, but as the teacher enters. And then after the teacher does prostrations, then generally you also offer prostrations. And if that is your teacher and you have a relationship, then you can be offering prostrations to the teacher. But if you don't have that relationship, then you're offering prostrations to the teaching throne itself, because it's representing that I'm here to study Dharma. And so I'm prostrating myself before the teachings of the Buddha. So it's not about the teacher or the teacher's ego, but it's about helping put your mind into a place where you're receptive to receive the teachings and participate in it.
Can we do that now?
You can do whenever you want, but and there's obviously no disrespect. I understand that from my side, but from the student side, it's helpful for your mind, you know. And if you're in a situation where you can't do physical prostrations, whether you're, you know, some people that have joined us online or due to your body, you can do mental prostrations as well. So you don't have to do physical prostrations if your body isn't able to, or your circumstances make it too difficult. More important is the mental prostration. They say, there's one teaching on prostrations that says the amount of merit, you know, the amount of merit you accumulate is relative to how much ground you cover when you prostrate. So why you can do the short prostrations or the full prostrations, the 4 ones are more beneficial. But then you visualize yourself as tall as a skyscraper, and then you get even more prostration and even more merit, because the visualized prostration is more powerful than the coarse body itself, you know? So the whole point of any of these things, some of them are just tradition, right? You look at them and you say, oh, that's the Tibetan, you know, Tibetan superstition maybe. But the reason we do these things is not just tradition or superstition. It is to help prepare our mind in such a way that when we engage with the Dharma, we're receptive. So even if you're at your home and you want to do your meditation session, you know, it's good to do prostrations to your image of the Buddha before you start a meditation session, even if it's just a mental prostration. Or when you're making offerings, you know, water bowl offerings, there's a specific way to do it. You know, when we recite Om Ahum and we do all these certain things, not because tradition matters for the sake of tradition, but it helps put our mind in the right mental space to receive the Dharma, you know? So just a little note. So now we've all come together to study the teachings of the Buddha, to learn what it means to develop a mind of happiness and joy so that we might benefit other sentient beings. So let's take a moment to let ourselves settle into the space, both physical space and mental space, prepare for a Dharma teaching. So all the concerns we had, you know, getting up this morning, getting dressed, dealing with traffic, dealing with family, all of these things, we can put those aside for the moment. Be comfortable in our space together. Set our motivation that we are here together today to study the teachings of the Buddha, not simply for our own benefit, but so that we might be of maximum benefit to others. And yes, our goal is to learn how to develop a mind of contentment, a mind of happiness and joy, but not simply because we want that joy for ourselves. It's because we realize that the more we progress with a happy mind, the more ability and skill and wisdom and techniques we'll have to be of service to other beings. So that's the ultimate goal. So let's set that motivation. We'll spend a little time this morning doing some prayers to help remind us of our motivation and remind us of the overview, teachings of the path. and to kind of soften our minds to be more receptive to the Dharma. So let's begin on page 34, as usual, with refuge and bodhicitta, and so forth, these 2 pages in the Gold Book. Our clock is working again. Yesterday evening, our clock had run out of batteries, the one back there. So it was, what was it, 6:15? 6:45. No, it was 6:45, the whole class. And I said, oh, okay. But now we're back. We actually, time is moving. So that's good. So we'll do refuge and bodhicitta 3 times in Tibetan, then once in English. And the remainder of the prayers we'll do in English. Sanghe Chiran Soki Kunam La Kanko Pardu Dagni Kapsu Chi Dagi Hinso Gi Pe Sonam Gi Drola Pinche Sanghe Dru Parsho Sanghe Chiran Soki Kunam La Kanko Pardu Dagni Kapsu Chi Dagi Hinso Gi Pe Sonam Gi Drola Pinche Sanghe Dru Parsho Sangye Chiran Soki Chonam La Dandu Bardu Dagni Kapsu Ji Dagi Jinzo Gi Personam Gi Kyola Pinche Sangye Dru Parsho. I go for refuge in time enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from bias for friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until this end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamneyatayami. Continuing on page 73, with praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings, to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, who got them, knower of the world, supreme God of human beings, to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, no other worlds, name God, human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakti clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides, and then said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I prostrate. With pure bodies, formed supremely pure, wisdom oceans like the golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free, like you, the 3 worlds are not, incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime, pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realization, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3, ever devout homage. To all worthy of respect, bound with bodies as many as all realms, atoms, and all aspects, with supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits may all sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the ways of aging, sickness, and death. Let's go ahead and recite the Heart Sutra. We're going to maybe talk a little bit about emptiness today, so it's good to remind ourselves. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear one time the Bhagawan was dwelling on massive Vulture's Mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also, at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Sharadvatiputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly, beholding that the 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance and no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to including no aging, no death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly completely awaken to the unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as true since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Kayatao gate, parasamgate, bodhi swaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from the concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that one should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadvatiputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised what has been spoken by the Bhagavan. Let's author calling the Guru from afar, I think. Page 125 for people. Skip some of the other ones.
There are two versions, short and long.
Yeah, let's do the
Right before 125.
125 in the Gold Book. Got it? Okay. Tormented whale, quickly drawing forth blessing alone. Lama, think of me, Lama, think of me, Lama, think of me. The wisdom of great bliss of all Buddhas, one taste with the Dharmakaya, is itself the ultimate nature of all kind lamas. I beseech you, Lama, Dharmakaya, please guide me always without separation in this life, future lives, and the bardo. Wisdom's own illusory appearance, the conqueror with seven branches, is itself the ultimate basis of emanation of all kind lamas. I beseech you, Lama Sambhogakaya, please guide me always without separation in this life, future lives, and the bardo. The play of various emanations, suiting the dispositions of the many to be subdued, is itself the behavior of the Sambhogakaya of the kind lamas. I beseech you, Lama Nirmanakaya, please guide me always without separation in this life, future lives, and the bardo. The play of the inseparable three kayas appearing in the form of the Lama is itself one with the very essence of all kind lamas. I beseech you, Lama, the inseparable three kayas, please guide me always without separation in this life, future lives, and the bardo. All the infinite, peaceful, and wrathful yidams are also the Lama's nature. And since no yidam exists apart from the kind Lama himself, I beseech you, Lama, who comprises all yidams, please guide me always without separation in this life, future lives, and the bardo. The ordinary form of all Buddhas arises in the aspect of the Lama. Therefore, no Buddhas are observed apart from the kind Lama himself. I beseech you, Lama, who comprises all Buddhas, please guide me always without separation in this life, future lives, and the bardo. The very form of all conquerors, wisdom, compassion, and power arises as the Lama. Therefore, the Supreme Arya Lords, the three types, are also the kind Lama himself. I beseech you, Lama, who combines three families into one. Please guide me always without separation in this life, future lives, and the bardo. The 105 and three types, however many, are elaborated, are the Lama. The pervasive master himself, in whom they are all included, is also the Lama. I beseech you, Lama, as master of all the families, please guide me always without separation in this life, future lives, and the bardo. The creator of all Buddhas, Dharma, and Sangha is the Lama, the one who combines all three refuges, the kind Lama himself. I beseech you, Lama, whose presence combines all refuges, please guide me always without separation in this life, future lives, and the bardo. Thinking of how the actual form of all Buddhas arises in the aspect of the Lama and mercifully guides me, reminds me of you, Lama. Thinking of how you show the excellent, unmistaken path to me, an unfortunate, wretched being abandoned by all the Buddhas, reminds me of you, Lama. Thinking of this excellent body, highly meaningful and difficult to obtain, and wishing to take its essence with unerring choice between gain and loss, happiness and suffering, reminds me of you, Lama. Thinking of the experience of not knowing what to do when the great fear of death suddenly descends upon me reminds me of you, Lama. Thinking of the experience of just now suddenly separating from all the perfections of this life and going on alone reminds me of you, Lama. Thinking of the experience of my naked body falling into the terrifying fires of hell and being unable to bear it reminds me of you, Lama. Thinking of how the suffering of hunger and thirst without a drop of water is directly experienced in the unfortunate Preta realm reminds me of you, Lama. Thinking of how very repulsive and wretched it is to become a foolish, stupid animal, and what it would be like to experience it myself reminds me of you, Lama. Thinking of a refuge to protect me from this, since I am now about to fall into the wretched states of bad migration, reminds me of you, Lama. Thinking of how white and black actions are experienced and of how to practice thorough and precise engagement and restraint reminds me of you, Lama. Thinking of a method to escape this prison of endless existences, the source of all suffering, reminds me of you, Lama. Thinking of the plight of my pitiful old mothers, pervasive as space, fallen amidst the fearful ocean of samsara and tormented there, reminds me of you, Lama. Therefore, Lama, please bless me to generate in my mental continuum effortless experience of the profound three principles of the path of the two stages. Please bless me to strive in one pointed practice the three trainings with the intense thought of renunciation in order to reach a secure state of liberation. Please bless me to train the precious supreme Bodhisattva with a special attitude, taking responsibility to liberate all migrators by myself alone. Please bless me to follow after the ocean of conquerors with the will to cross to the very end of the great waves of the deeds of the conqueror's children. Please bless me to realize the supreme view, free from extremes, in which emptiness and dependent arising, appearance and emptiness complement each other. Please bless me to quickly generate the experience of taking the three kayas into the path, ripening the bases of birth, death, and the bardo. Please bless me to arise as the illusory divine body itself, the play of the four joys and the four emptinesses, the wind and mind absorb in the central channel. Please bless me to meet the ultimate Lama, the bare face of my innate mind, with the covering of perception of true existence and perceiving it as true removed. Please bless me to be one with your three secrets, Lama, in the vast Dharmakaya of great bliss, which has exhausted the elaborations of the two obscurations. In short, please abide inseparably in the center of my heart until the great enlightenment, and mercifully bless me and the child to follow after you, the Father. Lama, think of me. Lama, think of me. Lama, think of me. Great. We will finish there for opening prayers. You know, whenever you approach a teaching or a practice, I always like to encourage that we adopt three attitudes whenever you come to a new teaching or a repeated teaching. The three attitudes, the first one is we want to try to adopt the long view or an attitude of the big picture or long view. And what this means is recognizing that the path between here and Buddhahood is quite vast. So the work we're doing now, it may seem like we're not making any progress, but that's only because it's a huge, big picture view we have to take. So even small steps are moving in the right direction, but we can't be discouraged. So we have the long view that realizes that we're not expecting to become Buddhas tomorrow, that the path between here and Buddhahood is quite long, extensive. And so because of that, any progress we make is moving in the right direction. So keeping a realistic recognition of the distance between our samsaric state and Buddhahood lets us rejoice in whatever progress we make and not feel defeated that we don't make progress more quickly, right? So first, that's the long view, the attitude of having a long view. Now, the second attitude I think is useful is the extensive attitude or broad attitude or view. And so this realizes that in order to become Buddhas, there are many different things we have to study and practice and work on. It's not just one thing we have to do. Right? So there are many things we have to learn that we may not be used to or accustomed to, and it can feel overwhelming because there's so many pieces. Trying to fit them all together can feel like a lot. But the extensive view is recognizing that that is an appropriate way to navigate the teachings, realizing that they are very extensive. We're not going to take all the pieces right away. So we work with what we can do and recognize that there are lots of pieces we have to study. Studying one thing only isn't going to be enough. But then, in addition to having this long view and the extensive view, we need to adopt a relaxed view or attitude, right? So that's the third one. And it's the view or attitude that realizes that yes, we need to constantly be putting effort into our Dharma practice. We also have to be striving to not fall into the trap of laziness, but we also have to have a little bit of relaxation. Because if we cling too tight, even to the holy Dharma, then we stress out and we close off our ability to realize Dharma because we're so tense. You have to find that balance of always pushing, but being relaxed.
I think that people are more towards the lazy part.
I know I am more towards the lazy path. I can't speak for any of you.
People are
I mean, most of us aren't used to engaging in this type of study, right? Even if we've been doing it now in this life for a few months, for a year, for decades, that's only this life. Think of how many lifetimes we haven't been doing this. So our habits tend toward some sort of laziness, right? But we are able to see our situation in this life and realize that, I'm working, I'm studying, I'm meditating 24 hours a day, and I just feel stressed out. And that's not helpful. We can see that in our worldly activity and our spiritual activity. So we have to find that balance of pushing ourselves, challenging ourselves, not resting on our laurels, as we say, but not burning out, basically. And so that's part of the reason I enjoy doing prayers. And I find reciting prayers as an integral part of my own practice. Because when I recite prayers, the prayers we recited today teach the whole path to enlightenment, right? They have all the different aspects of the Lamrim, they have Guru devotion, they have all the little bits and pieces. They have prayers describing the magnificence of the Buddha and emptiness. Everything is there in terms of all the little bits and pieces of the path. But at the same time, just by reciting them, I feel my mind calming. I find myself connecting to a lineage of practitioners and of teachers. And that is a way for me to open my mind up and be relaxed, So it's a way for me to constantly engage in Dharma, but not be tight, not be stressed out. So there are different practices you can find that help you relax, but it's an important attitude to take. So these three views: the long view, Buddhahood is far away. It's okay if we don't get there today. We're walking in the right direction. The extensive view, there are many different things we have to learn. And every time we learn one thing, we maybe find two other things that we didn't know, right? And that's just the nature of being samsaric beings who are doing our best. And the relaxed view that says, even though I'm working hard and I'm not going to be lazy, I can't be too uptight about things. So with those, so for me, I try to remind myself of those three things every time I engage in study, whether it's be study at the monastery, like studying my textbook, whether it be studying Dharma, even sitting down to meditate. I remind myself that I'm not going to become Buddha in this meditation session, And if I'm studying for one of my teachers, this will be more information that I didn't know, but it's only little bits and pieces that I still have to put together. And I can't cling to this practice too tightly because I always need to be enjoying the practice, It's like when you do the advice for a meditation session in general, and when you're doing a retreat, this is especially important, but even your daily meditation session, if you meditate every day, by the end of your session, you should finish your session while you still want to meditate a little more. Right? If by the end of your session you're exhausted and you're tired and don't want to do any more meditating, that means you've gone too long because you burnt yourself out. So you always should finish your session with still a little bit of interest that, I could still sit for 5 more minutes, right? Or 10 more minutes, just something like this. Because that way the interest is always there, right? So it's the same way when you go about any teaching. That's the relaxed view. And so to bring that to what we're talking about, this overall series, right? We're calling it the happiness series. And we discussed in the first couple of weeks were how to bring your Dharma practice into your everyday life at home, and then how to bring your Dharma practice and study into your life in the workplace. And now the last section is exploring negative emotions and toxic environments. The truth is, I feel like everything we're going to talk about in these next couple of weeks, last week and the next few weeks, is really included in those first sections as well. A lot of this is how to take Dharma practice and bring it into your everyday life. And so it's just different ways of looking at doing them. So last week, I think, what Venerable Kaldala went through was how to heal anger and how to deal with fear and anxiety, which is really critically important. So if there are any questions or ideas about that, you can bring them up later in the session. What we want to deal with today is how to deal with the ego, how to handle the ego, and then if we have time, how to deal with dishonesty. So I think that'll be kind of wrapped up in our whole practice. So when we talk about dealing with the ego, how to handle the ego, I think it's important first to know what we're talking about, because there's different ways of defining or understanding the ego in conventional language and in spiritual language. And if we don't know what we're aiming for, then we're always going to miss, right? So just in conventional worldly sense, what do we mean by the ego? When you say, oh, that person has a big ego, they're very egotistical, what do we mean by that?
Pride, a lot of pride.
Pride, like an overinflated sense of pride, usually, right? Or an overinflated sense of self-worth. But the thing is, you can also say, well, they have an appropriate level of ego, right? When you're talking conventional. So it's not always negative. It's bad when we say, oh, they're very egotistical, they have an inflated ego, but oh, they have an appropriate level of ego, is like the sense of self-esteem, right? Or self-respect. So in the conventional language or use of the word ego, it can mean both, like a negative and a positive, right? Depending on how, if we determine that their sense of ego matches how they act in the world, then we say that's an appropriate level of ego. Versus if it's oversized, then it's inappropriate. The word ego is Latin, and it just means self, we should say. It means I, right? That's an important thing to know. It's like doc, we say. So that's the conventional way of understanding ego. Now, the other thing you're gonna hear a lot is the Freudian analysis of the ego, right? And it's not super important for our purposes, but it's useful to think about. So Freud, is a 20th century like founder of psychotherapy, basically, or psychoanalysis, and he recognized and identified the ego, but then the id and the superego, these three things. And his term for them, what he spoke about them in German, and his word for ego was just I, the German word for I. And his translators switched it to Latin, and that's what stuck, right? But so we always have to remember that the ego is the I. And then the superego is the over I, the above I, the meta I. So what's the difference between these three? He says, this is according to Freud, that the ego is the kind of organized, realistic sense of self that engages in the world. And what it does is it mediates between the id and the superego. So the id is the instinctual behavior, the primordial behavior, mostly governed by minds of aggression and minds of the sexual impulse. So sex and violence, that's your id, your instinct, your primal nature. And he says that we don't have access to this except in our dreams, which is why he thought dream analysis was so important. So that's the id, like the primal instinct, right? It's uncoordinated. It's out of control, basically. And then the superego, he says, is basically morality. So that is the part of your mental aspect that is critical and is making judgment and is influenced by society and is trying to uphold social norms. So he says what the ego is a sense of pragmatic self that is experiencing your natural, your primal experiences, your instincts from the id, and then using the superego to modify them in such a way that you behave in the world, right? So it's a sense of self that's taking your primal instincts and modifying them through the lens of social acceptable morality. And that's how you exist in the world. And so this is interesting because I think the idea of it being your instinct being mostly governed by aggression and desire is something we can relate to, right? We say that the reason we are in samsara is due to the three poisons of ignorance, aggression, and attachment, right? Or ignorance, hatred, and attachment. So I think that his ideas are very similar in that way. And the fact that the id is inaccessible to him is also a sign of what we're saying is primordial ignorance. But when we talk about ego, we're not talking about the balance between instinct and morality, right? We're talking about something else. But in the Freudian idea, the ego is something that is constructed in the world. And that brings me to the last kind of contemporary idea of ego that I think is really useful. And this came about really in the 1980s. And it is known as the narrative self or the narrative identity, right? So what the narrative self or narrative identity is, it's the recognition that what we determine to be ourself, the way we exist in the world, is an internalized and constantly moving amalgamation or a type of agency that is developed by our experiences in the past, our interpretation of the present, and our imagination of the future, right? So what this does is it describes our psychological development of how I exist in the world and what factors I create the me that I hold on to. So I don't think this is what we're talking about when we talk about ego, but I think it's useful because it's talking about the sense of self as being produced, right? Through the stories we tell about ourselves. And that's something we know we can experience in our life. Like when I introduce myself to someone, how do I introduce myself? As a Buddhist monk, as a Buddhist teacher, as someone with a graduate degree, like what is the story that I'm telling about myself, right? So how do I construct my identity through the stories I tell about myself, both explicitly and implicitly, the ones I'm doing subconsciously or unconsciously, right? So when we're talking about getting rid of the ego, I think this narrative self is an important because we're constructing and performing our impression of what it means to be in the world, right? And this is just from a Western psychological point of view, this idea of narrative self or narrative ego. And the interesting thing is that this theory doesn't contradict Freud, right? But what it does is it's really looking at the idea of performance and how we perform and use storytelling as a way of creating our sense of self. So what our goal is in the Dharma is to dismantle the sense of self, right? Which isn't to say that we don't exist, that we're nothingness, that we're not worthy of love and joy and compassion, and we don't have the capacity to become Buddhists. It's to say that all of the sense of self that we identify as the ego, whether it's something that feels implicit and instinctual, or whether it's something we've learned, or something we've constructed, or are constantly constructing, that's always going to be based on the idea that we have some essential nature that isn't changing, right? And as long as you're grasping onto that, then we are mistaking the nature of reality. So we need to be able to dismantle the sense of self while still living in the world. That is the balance, right? We can't all just go meditate on emptiness and live in a cave. So we have to see, how can I use the conventional self, recognize it as being conventional, being necessary for me to exist in the world, but not hold on to it as if it were real, as if it were a true description of what makes me me, right? So I would say that the Buddhist idea of ego, dak, self, we're looking at two main things. The main thing is self-grasping, the grasping at self as truly existent. But then on top of that, and you're probably bored of hearing me say the same thing, is going to be self-cherishing, right? So the self-cherishing mind and the self-grasping mind are slightly different. The self-grasping mind is the mind that doesn't understand the nature of reality and that views the self or interprets the self as being permanent, non-changing, eternally existent, right? And that is the root cause of samsara, the root cause of our suffering. But right on top of the self-grasping mind is a self-cherishing mind. And it is the mind that says, I am the most important thing in the world. My happiness is most important. My freedom from suffering is most important. Me having comfort and not having discomfort is most important. And almost all of our actions are governed by the self-cherishing mind without realizing it. And so when we're trying to dismantle the ego, what we're trying to do is dismantle the self-cherishing mind, and through that, dismantle the self-grasping mind. So we can take different approaches. They're both important. Ideally, if we could just aim right at the self-grasping mind and dismantle it, the self-cherishing mind wouldn't have anywhere to go. But that is harder sometimes. Really understanding what it means to exist but not exist permanently or truly or inherently is a hard concept. So we meditate on emptiness. We try to understand that. We recognize that everything does not exist the way it perceives it, the way we perceive it. But we do that from one side. Attacking the self-cherishing mind is easier because we can see worldly examples very clearly in our life. Most of us can. So that way we're working at getting rid of the self from two directions at once. Excuse me, not getting rid of the self, getting rid of the ego, which is, say, the mind that grasps onto the self. We can never be free from suffering if we don't eliminate our self-grasping. That's the important thing to remember. No matter how much we study, no matter how much we practice, as long as we have self-grasping, we are going to be in samsara. As long as we are in samsara, we are suffering. It's impossible to be free from samsara if we have self-grasping. But we live in the world. We have a conventional self. The language we use to describe what the conventional self is the mere I, right? The mere I that is superimposed upon the psychosocial aggregates, or the psychophysical aggregates, excuse me. And those are just words. You're like, okay, great. What does that mean? And this is where I think the idea of narrative self is helpful. The mere I is the story we tell about ourselves to exist in the world. And as long as we can recognize that as just that, as a story that is not essential to who we are, then we can adopt the mere I to function in the world, to deal with other people, to go to job, have family, these things. As long as we're constantly navigating that this is not, there's nothing about this that is me, right? And so the way we do that is to work, at least in my opinion, to get rid of the self-cherishing mind. So self-cherishing is fueled by the self-cherishing is fueled by the belief that happiness comes from samsara. Right? Self-cherishing constantly labors under the belief that the perfections in samsara are going to bring me happiness, that it exists outside of me. And so in order to get rid of the self-cherishing mind, we have to come to grips with the fact that the nature of samsara is dissatisfaction and uncertainty, and that there will never be happiness that comes from samsara. Happiness and contentment come from our mind and the way we relate to our environment, right? And so, our lamas say, and especially in the mind training tradition, they say, there's no one gives us trouble except for ourselves, right? It doesn't matter. The external environment obviously makes it easier to feel different ways, whether they be negative or harmful or positive, right? But our trouble comes from our own mind. So we can't expect to have our ego dissolve on its own because it's coming from us. We are our own greatest enemy. The self-cherishing mind is the real enemy, right? So when we talk about the self-cherishing mind, it's easy to talk about it in vague way, but in order to really try to negate it, what I find the most helpful is to realize the self-cherishing mind is working in more than one way. In one way, it's active. It's seeking out pleasure, right? It's seeking out these things that we think we need, whether that be wealth or fame or pleasure or comfort or external validation. So it causes our behavior. It modifies how we behave in the world, how we project ourselves outward. But at the same time, it modifies how we react to others' situations around us. So in this way, it's working in two ways at once. It's both acting and reacting. And in both of those ways, it's creating a sense of self as being real, right? So the more we indulge the self-cherishing mind, the tighter we cling to this self-grasping, right? That's why they're so nefarious and they work together. Both in the way we seek out happiness or fame or pride or external validation, and when we react to having our sense of self questioned, right? So we need to realize that it's not working in one direction. Our sense of self-grasping is working in two directions, both in the way it reacts and the way it is proactive. And so both of those are things that we need to work on.
It's the question. A very basic question.
A very basic answer.
Are they saying ego and a sense of self is same? Because when we think about ego, it's mostly when we are boasting and when we are right. But we've also seen other examples when somebody has anxiety.
Mhm.
At that time also, because people have this very high sense of self that they are very anxious and socially anxious. So are we saying that ego is equivalent to a sense of self?
So are we saying ego is equal to the sense of self? So I think, first off, again, and I do mention this a lot, but discounting the fact that there are actual chemical imbalances, situations that cause manic depressive disorder or bipolar disorder, anxiety attacks, things like this. So discarding those physical realities that need sometimes external assistance to mediate them. I think that the sense of self and the ego um, and the very basic, we can say yes, the ego is the sense of self. But the problem is, they're saying it that way, that simply, is that we have a conventional self that does exist, right? It's the I, the mere I that exists, that it, functions in the world. And what the ego is doing is confusing the mere I for a truly existing I. So it's not just a sense of self. We do have a sense of self, that it can be healthy, right? And so that's where our self-esteem can come from, our self-respect. That's where our understanding of how we exist in the world can come from. And we need that to function. Even if we're living in a cave by ourselves and don't have interaction with other sentient beings, we need to have this recognition of I'm engaging in this practice so I can become Buddha, right? That term I is always there. So we always have to be able to say, like, there's a conventional I that does exist. It just doesn't exist inherently. And the problem is the way I am taking this inherent thing and assuming it to be inherent. So when we say the sense of self, it has both of those, the conventional I and the ultimate I, one of which exists and one which doesn't exist. So when we're talking about ego, we have to be careful about what we're talking about or what we're aiming for. We can't eliminate the conventional I. If we do, then we fall into this nihilism, right? That nothing matters at all, nothing exists, everything is pointless. So we can't say there's no conventional I, because there is a difference between you and me, right? I can recognize that, like, we're two different sentient beings that exist in the world in different ways, right? So we don't eliminate the conventional I, we eliminate the mind that collapses the conventional I and the ultimate I. And so in a general sense, the ego is what is grasping onto the conventional I as if it were truly existing. Is that, I mean, it's going to depend on context. I think, like I said, you can have a healthy ego, but when you say, oh, he has a healthy ego, what do we mean by that? We say, well, they have a good sense of self-esteem. They understand their place, that they use their position in such a way that benefits them. So when we say that, we don't really mean ego in the sense of self-grasping, right? So that's why I think it's important to just understand that the worldly sense of using the term ego is this idea often of an inflated sense of self-worth, but also self-esteem and self-respect. And so we can say that just because the word is referencing that, that's not what we're trying to get rid of necessarily. Or if people are mentioning Freud's idea of the ego, we're not trying to get rid of what Freud is saying is the ego really, right? We're just recognizing that he's using the same language to describe a similar thing, but not the same thing, right? So I think in the Buddhist sense, ego is our self-grasping mind, which conflates the conventional self with the non-existent, but believed to be existent, truly existing self. And that sense of ego is realized in the world through our self-cherishing, right? So the ego itself is self-grasping, believing the I to truly exist. And then the way that that is realized or acted upon is through our self-cherishing. So that's kind of what I'm pointing at when I say the ego.
But it's getting also confused that it exists, but it doesn't truly exist. So for a very beginner practitioner like me, I would think that it's still there. It's not truly existing. It's maybe still coming from a lot of causes and conditions and implications, but it's still out there for me to look after.
Yes, we say all phenomena, right, exists, but it doesn't exist in the way we perceive it. So we can say that exactly as using the language you mentioned. We say the self exists as a result of causes and conditions. That's the mere self. It isn't permanent. It doesn't come from nowhere. It isn't causeless, and it's constantly changing. It is the mere imputation of the idea of me that's imputed upon our body and our minds, right? So it does exist. That's the important thing. The self exists. The mere self exists, but not a permanently existing self. You know. So the daksam, the mere self exists. The mere I exists, right? And that I is mediated by causes and conditions. And that's why we say in one of the, I think, what is it, in the calling the guru from afar, it's recognizing that dependent origination and emptiness, or appearance and emptiness, are the same thing, right? They're co-related. So appearance is our recognizing how we exist in the world. right? The fact that we exist as a result of causes and conditions, or a set of interdependent conditions. So that's what we're trying to, when we talk about getting rid of the ego, we don't want to go too far and get rid of that. That's what I'm saying, is that we have to be careful. And that's where when we think of Western language using the ego, some of that can be beneficial, the idea of self-value, self-worth. We don't want to get rid of that. We want to get rid of clinging at that as if it truly exists and is defining who I am. You know, we talked a little bit about yesterday, so it's good to bring up again, the idea of shame and embarrassment, right? And how in the Buddhist context, when we say shame or embarrassment, we're referencing shame, for instance, is in your own mind, recognizing past negative behavior you've engaged in or negative minds you've cultivated, and then feeling regret at those negative minds and the impulse or desire to not engage in them in the future. And embarrassment is a similar mind, but it comes from others pointing out your negative behavior or negative minds, right? And that's different from a sense of guilt or the sense of shame and embarrassment that we're used to in Western culture. Because in Western culture, and we have this idea that I am my negative actions, right? So we don't distinguish between the me and the negative actions I do. So I did this bad thing, whatever it may be, that is representative of me as a person, right? So once we take that objective view, I engage in harmful behavior, I regret it, I don't want to do it again. But then we take that and we collapse it to being a representative of me as a person. Therefore, I'm a bad person, right? Those two things we connect them simultaneously. One of them has to do with ego, and it's misunderstanding an action for the actor, right? So that's how that ego, it infiltrates all of our minds, all of our activities, right? So we don't want to get rid of the conventional sense of self. There still is an actor, right? That we are not, this idea, people say we're all one, you know, we're not all one. We are different people. We're different sentient beings. So we exist separately from each other. We're related to each other insofar as there's this interdependent relationship that we have, right? Never mind that we're all here together studying Dharma together, but I just mean with all sentient beings, we rely upon other sentient beings in certain ways. So we're connected, but we're not one. We're separate, right? So when we get rid of the ego, it's not to say everything is like one big kind of, bliss bubble or something like this. All right? We are separate beings. So we have to look at the term ego and make sure we're not getting rid of ideas of self-worth and self-value, self-respect. But even those positive qualities don't define us, right? They are experiences and minds that we cultivate by recognizing the world we're in, you know? So your sense of self-worth doesn't define you as a person. Even if you have a healthy, good sense of self-worth, that can motivate you to act in a healthy way. That doesn't mean that's nothing about you as a permanently existing person, because that can change, right? That's the problem with any of these things. They can change due to causes and conditions quite quickly, right? So we don't want to conflate the mere I, that is a mere imitation, with a permanent. And that's what self-grasping does, or that's what the ego does. Is that kind of point? Which is, that's kind of why I wanted to talk about what we think of when we talk about ego, that when we use the term in the West, we see it in these different ways. I just wanted to recognize that those are all touching the same idea, right? The sense of self, but they're talking about it slightly differently than we are. And so when we're engaging in this thinking about it, we want to make sure we know exactly what we're pointing at. So by getting rid of self-grasping, that's how we get rid of the ego. And since self-grasping and really meditating on emptiness is difficult, we combine that with getting rid of self-cherishing, because self-cherishing is like the primary agent of the self-grasping mind. So what our plan is to take a tea break at 11:15. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so tea is being prepared. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And coffee. So we'll keep going for a little bit. So obviously we've talked about self-cherishing quite a lot, and sometimes I feel like a broken record because maybe it's just my favorite thing to talk about, but it's also the thing I struggle with most. And the eight worldly concerns are really what guide most of my behavior all the time. So that's why I like to talk about it so much. I need it for me, even if you don't need it. But I also know that Kevin Rinpoche, his teaching on the eight worldly concerns, granted he didn't title the book, but the book is titled How to Practice Dharma, right? The distinction between an action being Dharma or non-Dharma is whether it's motivated by the self-cherishing mind, which is to say one of the eight worldly concerns. And so having a really strong understanding of the eight worldly concerns, I think is really important. So we're going to go through them again, because I think if we want to get rid of our ego, we need to understand how our ego acts in the world, right? And our sense of self-grasping acts through these eight worldly concerns. So the eight worldly concerns are the minds or the motivations that are seeking out the four desirable objects and trying to avoid four undesirable objects. So the four desirable objects are gain or profit, are comfort, praise or compliments, and then a good reputation. Right? Those are the four desirable objects. And any of our actions that are motivated by a wish to seek out one of those is only going to lead us to suffering, which sounds harsh. You say, why shouldn't I want happiness? Why should I want to avoid? Why should I not want to seek out gain? Right? Why should I not want to seek out comfort? So how is it that my actions that are motivated by seeking out comfort are causing suffering? The reason, we'll get to that. Let me get to the undesirable objects first, because they work the same way. So if those are the four desirable objects, their opposites are the four undesirable objects, right? So if we have minds seeking the four desirable objects, we have minds that are constantly trying to avoid the undesirable objects. So we're trying to avoid loss, discomfort. We're trying to avoid criticism and bad reputation or infamy. Right. So those are the flip sides. And if we look at most of our behavior, we'll see that most of them are governed by one of those eight impulses or some sort of, derivation of those eight. The reason that's harmful is because to see how it's harmful, we should look at the effects, right? Don't just take my word for it, saying that like seeking out comfort is harmful. We have to look at the effect of an action that is motivated by seeking our own comfort and see what that does to our sense of self and to our self-cherishing mind and to our self-grasping mind, right? So if you can't see directly how something is harmful, you look at the result. And you say, is the result of this harmful or beneficial? And then you can tell by the result being harmful or beneficial if the action was harmful or beneficial, right? That one. So let's take out the idea of seeking for profit or gain. If I'm engaging in behavior purely for the sake of gain, how is that going to harm me, right? So what could actions we do? Think of what something we're doing seeking out gain. Think of something you've done in this life where you were seeking out your own profit over someone else's profit, especially, right? And now you may have made profit, you may have gained something, right? But all you gained is seeking out a worldly, samsaric experience as if that was your happiness. That's why it's harmful. Because it's saying that this gain, this worldly gain, is happiness. That's the danger of this mind, right? It's saying that this worldly experience is actual happiness. And if I get more of it, I will be happier. If I get more of it, my sense of ego will get bigger because I will have real happiness. It's seeking out joy in suffering. And in the same way, trying to avoid loss is again ascribing some sort of some permanent truth about samsaric existence. And if my actions are only to avoid loss, that is because I recognize that my happiness is dependent on external phenomena. If I have everything stripped away from me, all of my possessions, right, all my health, all my things, is it still possible to have a calm and content mind? And for me, yes, because my mind isn't trained. But conceptually, yes, right? Because our happiness does not come from our possessions. So if my actions are always focused on avoiding external loss or finding external gain, what's going to happen is that I'm going to engage in non-dominant behavior. And I'm going to take this idea of the self and I'm going to reify it. I'm going to make it more real than it really is. Yeah.
Where does looking for involved.
Yeah. So this is the important question.
Because when you get a job, you're getting it.
Yeah. No. You're 100% right. So this is the important thing. And this goes for pretty much all of these, right? Especially for reputation, right? Especially if you live in the world. You have to, there is an important use to having a good reputation. Even me as a teacher, if I have a bad reputation, no one's going to want to come listen to my teachings. And from my side, I don't need fame or popularity, but if people have respect for me, then more people can come to my teachings, which will then help share the Dharma more, right? So having a bad reputation will hurt that, right? And the same thing with trying to get it.
Monk, you represent the Dharma. So
Well, exactly too. So I mean, I have a lot of things that I have to do too as a representative of Dharma to make sure people don't have a bad interpretation of the Buddha Dharma in general. So the important thing, or seeking out a job, any of these things, right? The important thing is not to let that mind be what motivates us. So we can recognize that living in the world, we don't need, but for most worldly people, having a good job is useful. For having a job is useful, right? Because you need income to buy food, clothing, housing. If you have a family, you have to take care of your family. You to live in the world, you need these things. But so the important thing of living a spiritual life is recognizing that how can I engage in the world but not be trapped by the world? So if I'm going for a job, so if we're in a job and I'm trying to get a promotion, right? It's because I realize that my job performance is deserving of a promotion. And you may also be deserving of a promotion, but we're both trying to do it. I can try to get that profit for myself in a way that A, isn't engaging in harmful behavior, and B, is not saying, look, I know my happiness comes from getting a raise, but instead is saying, I know that by having more greater physical amenities or better physical conditions, it gives me more luxury to practice the Dharma. It gives me more opportunity to practice a spiritual path. If I am hungry every day and I'm struggling for food or I don't have good clothing, it makes it much harder for ordinary people to practice a spiritual path. Once you already have a level of spiritual realization, then whenever any difficulty comes, it's part of your spiritual journey and that can be very useful. But for most of us, if we haven't trained our mind that way, when we're overcome by physical or external difficulties, we're just struggling for survival. You know what I mean? And so that's why it's inappropriate as someone who practices a spiritual path to go look at people that are unhoused or impoverished and saying you should just meditate more. Or something. You should be happy with your suffering, blah, blah, blah. Like that's not useful. Even if like on a meta level it's true, we can't impose that on people. So you can go about engaging in the world, but always have the mind that says, I'm doing this so I can help other sentient beings. Right? And that goes for seeking out comfort and trying to avoid discomfort, right? It goes for all of these 8. The point is that we don't want these 8 to be what's motivating us. So it's nice to have like a nice place to live and like a comfortable bed, right? So for instance, for a long time at my house, I'm here. It must have been quite a few years ago. I had like a bed bug problem in my house or in my room. And so I got rid of all my mattress and everything because I just couldn't, no matter what I did, I couldn't get rid of the bed bugs, right? So I get rid of all my mattress, I get rid of anything where they could be living. And then I just started sleeping on a yoga mat on the floor. And then it came to be a thing where I don't really need a bed. Like this yoga mat is fine and it doesn't take up space in my room. And so for many, many years, I just slept on a yoga mat, like nothing else. And my teacher was like, you're crazy. Like, why are you only sleeping on yoga mat? And for me, I'm like, you know what? I have to travel a lot in India. No matter where I go, I'm probably going to find bedding that's better than this yoga mat. So I can sleep and be comfortable anywhere I go, especially as a monk. When we go travel for winter debate, we have like these really hard mattresses, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, no matter where I go, I'll be comfortable. I can sleep. I won't be out. So that was my mindset. Then finally this year, I got like just a thin mattress, like just a thin one. And I was like, oh, I sleep a lot better now. Spent so many years on a yoga mat. I'm 40 now. Having just, a little bit of a mattress is helpful to me. So for me, having that, seeking that out, isn't because I want to have more comfort in my body, but it's recognizing that if I get a better night's sleep, then I can study better and I can serve better, I can teach better. Everything I do is better, right? Just by having a better night's sleep. So seeking out a more comfortable mattress, even though it may not be a big thing, is part of my practice, or it makes my practice stronger, right? So then it is seeking out comfort, but it's not because I just want external comfort or I believe having a nice mattress will bring me happiness. because I recognize that if I create better conditions for myself, I can then be a better spiritual practitioner, right? And so, yeah.
And so follows to the promotion. So if a promotion actually leads you to have less time and less mental space to practice, you probably shouldn't be pursuing it. Correct?
Yeah, probably. I mean, again, it's going to be case by case, but there are many times where getting a promotion in your job means you have more responsibilities, more to do, and then that actually can just cause more stress and difficulty in your life that isn't going to benefit you in the way that not having a promotion would. So you have to find that balance, especially if you have a family, trying to balance, is it worthwhile, or not even a family, but if you're someone that finds benefit in spending time with friends or other people you care about, and all your time is spent at work, and then all of a sudden, all you're focused on is work. So you don't have time for your personal practice. You don't have time for a worldly practice either, So you have to find a balance,
But often you can't avoid a promotion. I mean, pursuing it is one thing, but if you don't get the promotion, people might seek you out anyway. Because that's it's not so.
Sometimes if I know that you're capable, but then it's a thank you.
Again,
Emotion.
so the important thing about this is that these are all very valid points. But the point is that this isn't prescriptive of the external situations we're going to come across, because as many countless sentient beings there are going to be countless situations that we can encounter. So then what we do this practice for is to have the tools to recognize how to navigate any situation, right? And to say that I can seek out a promotion without grasping at the fame of having a higher title or the money that comes with it. And I can do it in a certain way. Or if I'm given a promotion like that I don't necessarily want, but because of where I am in the company, it naturally comes to me, I can adopt that and incorporate it into my practice in such a way that doesn't allow me to become full of myself and define my self-worth by my title or by my position, right? So as long as we're looking at these 8 minds and making sure that they aren't motivating our behavior, that no matter what circumstances come, we can do it with a way that those circumstances are transformed into our spiritual practice, right? But as people living in the world, we do have to deal with reality, right? Which means we need to have a job. We have to deal with other people. We can't just, even as a monk living in a monastery, I have to do certain things that could look worldly from the outside. But even like getting a nicer mattress to sleep better looks like I'm, trying to avoid discomfort, right? And it could be. I know people that have like really nice mattresses. And I'm like, maybe you don't need this. This, not in my monastery actually. But then on the flip side, my teacher, I bought him a really nice mattress a couple years ago. He's also 65 years old and he takes care of like 25 young monks. And he's constant, his body just needs something that my body doesn't need right now. So buying him a really nice mattress from my side, as a student, A, it was an offering, but B, it was recognizing that by helping him take care of his physical body, he does so much good work that he needs his physical body for. So from his side, he doesn't need luxury, but from my side, I want to give it to him, right? So he then is able to have this nice mattress that he can stay on without it being something that he's attached to, right? So it's not to say we all have to live these ascetic lives that we're, as we were talking about yesterday, it's like carrying a bag of thorns on our back, right? We can have comfort as long as we don't define our happiness by that comfort. Okay, we will keep talking about these, but let's take a break, have some tea and coffee, just a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back.
15 minutes.
Oh, excuse me, 15-minute break.
11:30.
Okay, we'll be back at 11. We'll be back at 11:30.
11:30.
So take a break, stretch your legs.
There's adequate tea, coffee, and
Okay, so we'll be back in a few minutes. Robles is joining us online.
When
Yeah.
Please do
Okay.
be honest. I think to the water.
Thank you. Please, everyone, enjoy a brief snack. Get your energy up.
Begin. Come and
What did you think?
serving. I'll talk to you. Okay. The good news is we have got some nice filter coffee now coming. Again, and
I remember I was open in such a thing. So monk. then he with the French manufacturer. So I remember that saying, redness are not thrown away. So but I don't have any.
Yeah.
So you know. Anything. No, I don't want. But I'm not saying as not that.
He just.
I just did what I thought Rinpoche would be happy with.
Yeah. So you gave it everything.
Or you can have, the jugs are full.
Yeah, please, sir.
So generously take it. So, and the other thing, the good news is now we have got filter coffee also for next. Online. Or, but you will get, I mean, the filter is going to be put filter coffee. Very, very. If they have you can actually enjoy. That's the idea. These things, I just want to make more. If you wanted to speak to, Abba, Shagun, or if we come and have the snacks and tea coffee.
Feelings are very overlapping. I don't think.
Yesterday.
Oh, then. I don't like. I'm used to wearing sandals. So wearing socks. I'm so used to being in America. I never wore sandals, but now I did it for 13 years, and so wearing socks on my feet is still really hot and sweaty all the time. But when I'm walking here, when I'm traveling, I wear shoes. I don't get there, then I have to wear socks, and then all of a sudden. But it's natural.
That's why I can tell you. And then now they're doing jobs.
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, I made these, so I did these.
Very
Yeah.
good.
So I did these.
Yeah.
Really? Maybe not that hard. It's the yarn is so small. And it takes a long time. The amount of time it takes to make a hat, you do like 3 times the amount of work for a sock. The yarn is so thick.
When she was made through the year. Small crochet crops of the shirts. And before she was making this one in the next.
I did. It's very easy. And so we have to help them over.
I'm doing this project now. Let's see how it works. And all my export friends to see Hindi particularly. So there's a Japanese thing called Boro. Sashi was basically was measured from research. Boro is basically Kange work. Kange ಅಂತ ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಕಂಗೆ ಅಂತ ಅದು ಕೌಡಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. ಅದು ಹಳೆಯ ಪತ್ರಿಕೆಗಳು ಎಲ್ಲ ತಗೊಂಡು ರನ್ನಿಂಗ್ ಸ್ಟಿಚ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ you make one ಬೆಲ್ಲ ಅದನ್ನ people enjoy it.
Oh, but
And also here
And also,
This will be ginger. This is exactly what happened.
Sunday series and
Yeah.
470 series.
Okay, you can tell me. So I don't feel it's the heat and okay, but it's some possibility.
Yeah, yeah.
We need to do something.
It was.
Sure. Very.
It's very relaxed. It's such a something that's open, so anyone if they are experienced in producing can get something out of it. It's beautiful.
So I can mark for.
But it's like,
Yeah, no. ಒಳಗೆ ನೋಡಿ ಕಾಟನ್ ಗೀತ ಹಾಕ್ತಾರೆ ನಾವು ಮಾಡೋದು ಯಾವ್ದೋ ಹೊಸ ನೋಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಒಳಗೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹೊತ್ತಾಗಿ ವಾಶ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಹಾಕಿಲ್ಲ ಕಾಟನ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ತುಂಬಾ ಕಷ್ಟ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಇದು ಆತರ ಅಲ್ಲ ಮಧ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಸೀರೆ
And then you stitch along with it so it
small not in ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ
that's
ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ನಾನು ಈ ತರ ಮುಗಿಸಿದ್ರೆ ನನ್ನ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಅದನ್ನ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಷನ್ ಇಷ್ಟ coaching or things like that. ನೋಡಿ
So I think the place of people or so, it means it's almost always an inflated sense of self. But it can be a very receiving on this. And almost be a confidence. Yeah. But it's not an idea. It's like a sense of self-worth and self-esteem. It's not inflated. So I've heard that. But you're right. When you say that person has an ego, you need an overinflated sense.
any life threat
Breakdown, yeah, shutting on substation, which can be a foundation. I think what's useful for me is that no matter how I use it in a worldly sense or outside, if I see that those are all being related to the self-graphic and self-character minds, then it kind of all makes sense to me, you know? Like because I say, well, what's the cause of this? Right? Where is that happening? You know, where is it coming from? So then if I can identify the root, then hopefully work together. Terms in our everyday speech that are reflected the way we understand them in a good sense, but they're not the exact same. And so that's something similar. Sorry. But like I often think about it's anger and how it can take even because we, are engaged from that. And so so there's a anger and outrage. Right? And so anger becomes the sense that it's only my emotions about that. Okay, you can look at it as and being upset at this, right? And that's something you start becoming.
I left this long ago. I have told Arjuna about it. But because that is still there. You said, for Shanti, Venerable Rajendra.
I'll give it to them. But Raptan is only coming in November.
Make sure they get it because Geshe-la specifically
Okay.
said like kept it for them.
No, it's fine. But
I'm telling you, there's an Excel where we have all the
yes.
ISBN.
Yeah. Well, long as I also because there's something it's still popular now. If you have like
So Shakun, as you know, I've now
what do they
been
call
in
there's
charge
like
of the
anchor rooms
center
where you just
for
go and
4.5 years.
you break
There's a software
have like
on the
crockery
desktop.
and you get
This is the desktop.
it's not like you go pay money, go to this place and
In
collect
the desktop, it's a Windows
and it's a
desktop.
good way to let out your stress and
Plug
your
it in, it should work.
this is crazy. Like all you're doing is putting out in your app, right?
There's a software with all the.
Screaming into a pillow doesn't make your anger go away. It makes you
And
comfortable with anger.
indexes on the books also, the same index. There's a library software. It has the titles and the index. And the ISBN
Okay, friends, those of us who
software
are online, we're back.
out there.
Let's take a moment to settle back into our space together. Thank you so much for the tea and coffee and snacks.
So
Thank you. 1 minute.
There's evidence and it's still there. So if any of you
And
want
if
to
you want an
leverage
Excel,
your
you
places,
can
you
export
can
from
take it.
that.
Otherwise, you can have it even at the end. Just for your info. Looks like what's that?
So,
Can I ask a question? In the beginning, you spoke about the let's say respectful way to go to initiate teachings like frustration and so on. And you also mentioned that normally in a more formal setup, you wouldn't be nice to us before time. So in this situation where we are in not same space, what would be the respectful and most appropriate way to engage or not engage before teaching?
it depends on the teacher. It's fine. For me, if I'm here, then it's okay to engage with me and talk with me. And I think for most of the teachers that currently are teachers here at the center, myself, Kaldama, others that come, I think it's appropriate. But just play by ear and see if the teacher is trying to prepare or like do their own thing, then take distance. Or if you just say hello and you see you can judge, and I think it's fine, So just be conscientious, and then it's fine. From my side, I'm sitting here, I'm fine. It's not a problem. So it's just a matter of, again, this is the situation we have. We have this lovely space. It just doesn't happen to have a private space for teachers before him. So that's okay. And then we do the best of what we've got. So it's a matter of playing it by ear. I think, in this, it goes to the heart of so much of our practice. But as long as what you're doing it respectfully with the right intention, then it's appropriate. And you have to find that balance of whatever we're doing to say, how do I engage in this appropriately? And when you do with the right mindset, then you check how it works. So, the difficult thing for me. So something that I struggle with is I always try to have appropriate level of relationship with my teachers, right? Especially when Lama Zopa and so forth would come to the monastery, or I'd be in close proximity and him, he's in such high demand, kind of, and he spends all of his life in practice. So like if he isn't seeing people, he's doing some sort of meditation practice. He's always quite busy. So trying to get an audience with him is very difficult. But if I had something important to say, I would try to get an audience and respect his time like that. So that I can do from my side easily. But then I see other people just seem like they're wasting his time, and I get very upset by it, and that is not an appropriate way to go, right? Me getting upset by that's not my job, right? Exactly. It's full of judgment. And whether or not that was a respectful way for them to behave, like Lama Zopa and his retinue, his entourage, can navigate that situation. Like they are capable of it, And so for me to be like, well, this is my teacher who I have such respect for, yet I'm going to be the one that gets upset on his behalf. What is that? You know what I mean? So it's really about my own ego.
Maybe in the context, it may be okay actually what they're doing.
I have no idea. We have no idea if it's okay or not, right? I don't know what's going on in their minds. And if it really wasn't okay, Lama Zopa would find a way to put a stop to it, right? But regardless of that's a different example because it's Lama Zopa. So like when you're in a situation, what's most important is recognizing for me, this is the appropriate way that I understand it is appropriate to relate to this situation, to this teacher or to this environment. I'm going to do it respectfully, right? And if there are other people that aren't doing it respectfully, and there's an opportunity for me to explain it to them in a helpful way, I will. But if there isn't, that's not my job. Similar with Dharma Center, we don't have it so much here, but like often at Dharma Centers, you'd have volunteers or students who do the offerings and things like this. And if they're new to it, you don't know how to do it. You don't walk up to them, especially in front of other people, and say, "What are you doing? You're not doing it right." You know what I mean? Like that's not helpful. But you can find a way to say, "Oh, there's a different way to do this that you want me to show it to you like this, Or even as I mentioned this morning when I talked about what is normal to begin a Dharma session, I'm not telling you how to behave. I'm not telling you what you need to do. I'm just saying there is a way to do it and there's a reason it's done that way and see if that works with your mindset. Do you know what I mean? So it's trying to find that balance of saying how to help others on the path without being too pushy about it. Because that's part of the ego as well, right? To think that I know better than you. And I'm going to show you that I know better than you. And I might know better than you, right? I may have been studying longer. I may have better understanding. But so then you have to say, well, why am I telling you this? Am I telling you this because I actually care about you and I want you to improve your practice and improve your life? Or am I telling you this because I want you to see that I know it and you don't know it, right? So the external action may look the exact same, but the internal action is wildly different. So that's what we have to focus on is the internal action. So what I thought we'd do in the rest of our time together, first, I want to go a little bit more about how we can identify the 8 worldly dharmas, and then maybe we will do a meditation on them. We also had as a topic today how to deal with dishonesty. And I don't have a lot to say on it because I think it ties in with everything else we've been talking about. So maybe just to bring it up, and that way if you have thoughts or questions, you can bring them up. But when someone is dishonest toward you, right? Why do we take that personally? Right? That's the question. And now, obviously, in again, worldly context, if someone's lying to you and it creates problems in your job or in your life or in these things, you need to know that, or it's helpful to know that, and you have to find a way to navigate it. Okay? So that's important. I'm not saying people can lie to you and you can just be like a doormat, a welcome mat, and let them do whatever they want. But why is that causing you unhappiness?
Cultural thing.
I would
Explain.
Yeah.
There was a situation at work where we were studying this honesty, and when some people in the Indian culture from here were given feedback, it was very personally taken as if the project had failed because of them. But then another person, actually, they were from another continent altogether. And when they said, we're only talking about the work, we're not making a comment about anybody personally. And I think it's the lens from where and how you, but then the work is more important. And so is it for us. But for us, the attachment of ourselves into the work and Maybe it's a culture.
I think, we have to be aware of the environment that we're in, and the culture we're in, and that will affect how we engage in the world. What I think is important, that speaking of honesty and thinking of things like this, and dishonesty, is that when someone is dishonest towards me, I take it personally because it is, I believe that I deserve to have the truth told to me all the time, right? And that therefore it's me saying I deserve this. Like, you should not be treating me this way. How dare you treat me this way, right? So it's my own sense of self-worth that I feel is being challenged by someone lying to me or being dishonest or being manipulative. Yeah.
But it could also be that, I shouldn't trust in that person, and maybe no longer I can really trust you. Because, like, if you treat somebody like a nice acquaintance or a friend, you have some sort of a trust. And then not maybe in some cases that you should not be doing this to me, but also maybe I trusted you, and maybe from now onwards you're really not, I cannot rely on you because you don't say the truth always. That could also be.
When someone whom I have benefited and in whom I have great hopes gives me terrible harm, I should regard that person as my holy guru. Right? It's one of the mind training verses. Yes, you're right. Right? That
We also
again,
tend to overlook that we may be doing the same thing to others.
well, never
That's
mind.
okay.
Never mind that we overlook our own negativities, right? We say it's much easier, it's much more valuable to see one negative thing about yourself than 1,000 negative things about others, because those are much easier. But yes, you're right. And in certain circumstances, if you know someone is not trustworthy, then as a way of protecting yourself, then you do have to recognize that maybe your external relationship with them has to change. So that's true. But that's, again, taking account that your worldly behavior and your mind that is impelling or compelling that behavior aren't the same thing. So if you constantly lie to me, or if I constantly lie to you, then you should know, okay, I can't trust this person, so I can't ask them to do certain things because they may not do it or whatever reason. So that'll modify how you behave around me. But if me lying, then you take it personally and it makes you upset, it creates difficulty in your mind, then that's different. So saying, how can I create a physical environment that doesn't allow me to have these negative minds? And I think the important thing here, and the reason it is worth talking about, is we want to talk about the difference between developing a mind of, let's say, contentment and indifference, right? Or a mind of non-attachment versus a mind of detachment. So contentment, right, as we talked about before, is a mind that says, no matter what circumstances arise, I won't let them rile me up. So when really wonderful circumstances arise, my mind won't go up and down. And when difficult circumstances arise, my mind won't go up and down. But no matter what comes, I can have like a base level of contentment, that I recognize that if I win the lottery, that's part of my practice. And if, I'm in a car accident, that's part of my practice. And I can try to maintain this mind of contentment, right? Because that's where joy comes from, when you're not dependent on the external circumstance for your own happiness. But regardless of it, you have a mind of contentment. But that's different than indifference. That's different than not caring at all, right? And saying nothing matters. I don't care about it, right? So we have to find that difference, because one of those is like a poisoning mind. To say, I don't care, nothing matters at all. I'm totally indifferent. Nothing is important.
When one has to be more careful when one gives negative feedback.
Yeah, of course.
Giving positive feedback, you're more or less mindful, but we have to be very careful giving negative feedback.
They actually, we're told that when we get feedback,
Any culture.
It's both negative and positive. There's actually, what's the advice I was reading recently? It was very specific advice that says you have to be careful giving positive feedback as well, because if I'm just inflating your ego, then that feedback isn't helping you.
Yeah, we
right?
have this in teaching, we say punished by rewards. We give a lot of, there was a good, sometimes feedback when it is like given as it's positive and it's positive, it kind of like this child may start to believe that there's nothing that they can do wrong, and it becomes attached to that feedback, and then you're punishing them.
Yes, that's so basically either way, we need to be mindful, right, of how we relate to others and make sure that we're skillful, right? And again, that goes to different cultures, that different people receive things differently. So you just have to be skillful given the environment. But what I think is important is when we're receiving something, that distinction between contentment and indifference, and that same thing is the distinction between non-attachment and detachment. So non-attachment, right, is saying that I am not attached to these external things as my validation of self or as my happiness, right? That's not the same as I don't care about anything at all. You can care deeply about your friends, about social justice issues, about many things. You can care about them and still have non-attachment, because they don't define who you are as a person. They don't define your sense of self-worth. They don't define your happiness or your suffering. So that you can have a sense of non-attachment with these things. But detachment is saying none of this matters, right? I don't care about anything. So we have to find that balance of having a mind of contentment, but not a mind of indifference, a mind of non-attachment, not a mind of detachment, right? And so if we're dealing with dishonesty or any other harmful actions from other people, right? We first have to realize this person is suffering. The reason they're doing this is because they don't want to suffer. That's the only reason someone lies to you, right? Because they want their own personal gain of some sort. And they think that by engaging in this harmful action, they're going to have happiness. So it's an expression of their own ignorance that they're doing, whatever it may be, whether it be physically assaulting you or lying to you, whatever it is, right? Being mean to you. They want happiness. They don't want to suffer, and they don't understand the difference. So they're running headfirst into samsara, and they're grabbing it as if it were happiness. So when you realize that, you can recognize, you can see that person engaging in a harmful action towards you, and it generates compassion instinctually because you realize all they're doing is creating more suffering for themselves. And no matter the difficulties they've created for me in my life here, maybe they spread rumors about me that cause some problems at my work or my job, right? So they've caused problems for me in this life. They've caused many lifetimes worth of negative karma for themselves. So you develop a mind of compassion. And then from your side, you say, what is it about their actions that caused my mind to become upset? Yes, they may have caused circumstances more difficult, and now I have obstacles to overcome. Okay. But what is it about my mind that has been so attached to my picture of myself, my sense of self-worth, that their lying or their negative actions towards me affected that? Right? And this goes when we think of in the eight worldly dharmas, the eight worldly concerns, the four undesirable objects that we're trying to avoid loss, discomfort, criticism, or bad reputation. Why are we trying to avoid those things? And as we said, in a worldly sense, it's good to avoid those things, right? In a worldly sense. And we live in the world. So it's good that people don't have a bad reputation of me, right? And it's good that I'm not constantly being criticized. I don't mean like helpful criticism, but I mean like, harmful criticism. So it's good to engage in behavior that doesn't encourage those things happening. But that's for me living in the world. That's not for me improving my mind. So if my only goal is to not be criticized, then I'm not going to be engaging in a spiritual practice, Because I do many things. Like they say that if you actively are working on your mind the way that our forebears have taught us, like a real mind training practitioner, someone who's really dedicated to the spiritual path, from the worldly perspective, they look like a crazy person. Because their actions of a spiritual life are so different than what we value as a worldly life, are so wildly different, that you look like a crazy person. So if you're concerned with status and with other people having good thoughts of you, that will discourage you from practicing a spiritual life. It could, Even coming here, like how many people, you might have friends who say, why do you go spend 3 hours, at this Buddhist center in the morning? You could be having brunch, or you could be doing all these other things that are much more relaxing, So, I don't know about you, but I know that when I was in college, going to do like meditation and going to Dharma teachings, your friends are like, that's crazy. Like, why are you wasting your time? You can do that after college. You're in college. Have fun, right? So you have to see like, what is the balance of, am I basing my life on what others are saying about me or on my spiritual journey, And so when others engage in these harmful actions towards you, you have to realize where that's coming from and then realize what is it about my mind that allows myself to be hurt by that? Why am I trying to avoid it? Why do I try to avoid thinking of just gain and loss? Think of one of the nicest things you bought or you've been given in your life, physical things, whatever it may be, really a nice car, nice house, whatever, beautiful clothes, anything you've had that you were really excited to receive this thing and it brought you happiness, right? Was that real happiness? As long as you had that thing, did your happiness stay the same? Or did your happiness go away? Even if that thing didn't change, didn't break down, didn't wear out, you get tired of it, right? Because it's not happiness. It's worldly happiness. Okay. And it's okay to like nice things, but that's not happiness. So we have to find that distinction. So if my actions are based on trying to find happiness outside of myself, I'm always going to be dissatisfied. So I can appreciate when nice things come in my life, but that doesn't define my happiness. If my mind is seeking out my own comfort and trying to avoid discomfort, it's going to give me temporary relief, not relief from samsara. So the way to go about looking at this is to look in meditation at all 8 of these and ask yourself, and we won't go through all of them, but to ask yourself, what is something, so going through the first one, where I have gained something, did it bring me happiness that was long lasting? And then the flip side, what is an occasion in my life where I lost something, where I didn't get what I wanted, or something was taken away from me? Did that actually cause long lasting and unchanging sadness or disappointment? Or was it a temporary misalignment of my mind, right? And was it my relationship? Did that thing, external thing, actually cause happiness or sadness? Or was it me that caused it? So actually, in a meditation session, try to analyze. Like, don't just talk about it. Pick a real thing in your life, something that happened to you or something you received. And in the same way, when someone praised me and has given me a compliment, what did that do to my mind? And did that benefit me? And when someone critiqued me or insulted me, why is it that I got upset? You know, in Lama Zopa's book, How to Practice Dharma, he gives a great meditation on insult, where when someone insults you or critiques you, you think about the fact that their criticism is just words. It's just literally sound. Yet somehow that mere sound has caused such a great disturbance to your mind, right? So someone saying an insulting thing to you, all it is sound, literally. It's the movement of wind that goes into your ear, causes a small vibration, and your brain hears the thing. That's all it is. Somehow that mere sound totally upset your mind and can ruin your whole day or your week or your month. How do we give power to mere sound to cause such a disruptance in our life? So he has a whole meditation about that, So you can do something like this. You say, when someone insults me, what are they insulting? They're insulting my mind that says I am important. They're insulting my self-cherishing, right? The mind that grasps, they're insulting my idea of who I am because I believe I truly exist. I believe that there is a real me that exists. And by you insulting that, you're commenting on me as a person. But if I didn't have that mind, that self-grasping, what is there to insult? Right?
So, Venerable, we were talking about self-esteem earlier.
Mhm.
I think insult and self-esteem also go, in at least a very worldly sense, go hand in hand.
Mhm.
Whenever somebody insults us, we think, oh, we have a self-esteem. How can they say something about me?
Mhm.
So, and that's why we kind of retaliate as well. So now this self-esteem is not a good thing to be attached, good thing to have. Rather, it really becomes more of an ego.
Yeah, there's value in knowing your abilities and your worth, right? And so there's a healthy self-esteem you can have. So for instance, I'm confident, let's just say, of certain Dharma topics that I can teach about, and I feel confident that I know them well enough to teach. And so being aware of my own abilities is useful in that way. That I feel confident that I can teach these in such a way that I'm not doing disservice to the Dharma, right? So that's like a healthy level of self-esteem. But then it's very easy for that to turn into, look at how smart I am. I'm going to show off that I know, you know what I mean? And it becomes a source of pride and ego, right? So the same with all these things. There's a healthy level of them that we can adopt. But we recognize that me understanding this, whatever it may be, doesn't mean I'm a good person. Doesn't mean I'm better than any other person. And if I start believing that means I've created a self that doesn't exist, right? I'm grasping onto this permanent self and saying it's defined by this little bit of knowledge that it happens to have. So I think self-esteem is important just because our culture teaches us that we're not really worth a whole lot, especially those of us that come from marginalized or oppressed identities, especially women in society right now are often told they're not as valuable as men and other marginalized voices as well. So having self-esteem that says, no, I am valuable, I have something to contribute to the world and to myself, regardless of how others perceive me, is useful. But it can get out of control, as can all of our good qualities. As soon as we start defining ourselves by them and saying, this is me, then they're no longer helping us, right? So we have to find that balance. But I think self-esteem in general right now is useful if we can have a healthy relationship with it, And even like being able to rely on ourselves, have self-reliance, and understanding of self-worth, I think is useful, right? Just to live in the world. Because if we just think that I'm useless, I'm nothing, I'm never going to amount to anything, then why would you practice Dharma? Like, why would you do anything? You know what I mean? So it falls into this kind of negativity pit that cycles around that really is a type of self-care, right? Because it's really focusing yourself as the center of everything in the world, you know? So a lot of types of depressive minds, and again, I'm not talking about like chemical imbalances, but like our worldly depressive minds or the minds of worthlessness are because we're focused on ourselves. So they actually are types of our ego, even though from the outside it looks like I think I'm worthless, and usually the ego is I'm most important. It's the two sides of the same coin, right? That spur those kind of ways into being. And it happens to all of us. There's definitely times in my life where I've done things, and in my life since I've been a monk, never mind my life, where like I'm like, wow, I am a piece of garbage. Like I am not any good. Like I try so hard and look at I still mess up no matter what. I've had those moments. And then when you have them, you say, oh, okay, what is this doing? Is this a useful way to think? Right? And then you say, okay, no, it's when you can analyze it, then you can say, this is useful. So what is the useful part? Okay, I made a mistake in some way. I'll do my best not to make that mistake again. But judging myself and saying I'm a bad person isn't actually helping. It's just causing me to engage in more harmful minds, right? So it's normal for these to come up, right? Because we're suffering sentient beings. But when they come up, by practicing, by meditating, by becoming familiar with the 8 worldly concerns and with the self-grasping and self-cherishing minds, by being familiar with it, when they come up, we notice them more quickly. And when we notice them, we don't get trapped by them. That's the important part of this part of our journey, is to be able to notice when we're under control of these minds. We're not going to get rid of these right away. If we were, welcome to Buddha, that's great. I would love it if we could just be like, oh, 8 worldly concerns, oh, great, done. It's not that easy, unfortunately. But what we can do is the more we study, and again, I know I repeat myself, but the reason I focus on the self-cherishing mind so much is because even no matter how much we practice it, they still are pervasive in our lives, right? In very insidious ways. So, yeah, go ahead.
Body is really for instance, it tends our sense of the inflated I, our sense of self-importance. Vicky was mentioning a thing about cultural. Now in India, we never give people credits because we think, it is like it will inflate their ego, they will develop a swollen head. It is something like that. In fact, the thing is to be humble. It's a very Indian, and it's even in the subcontinent. That's the thing, we are like touching elder person's foot, making their blessings. For people get into a monument, many monuments are the doors are very small. So it is a very cultural thing like that, they teach you to be humble.
But that's true. But you have to look at that 2 ways, right? So if humility is quite important, right? But that is for me to practice humility. I shouldn't then force you to practice it. So if I say I'm not going to compliment you because I want you should be humble. That's not practicing humility, right? That's me being arrogant and thinking I understand your mind, right? So that's what they said in many places, right? Because we think we know better than others, but in truth, we don't know their minds. So if I'm going to criticize someone or praise someone, I need to do it and be very clear on my motivations for it. Sometimes people need criticism. It is helpful, right? Never mind, like anyone that has siblings or children or works with coworkers and are in charge of a community, sometimes you have to give criticism, right? Especially if they're doing something harmful to themselves or to others. But you can give that criticism in such a way that you're not judging them, that they don't feel judged, and you don't feel yourself that you're better than them. But you're saying, in order to improve the physical circumstances or environment, this is useful criticism. So you can give it in such a way that it isn't coming from a negative mind. And they may still interpret it negatively. You can't control that. All you can control is the way that your intention, right? And that's most important. And be aware, again, of cultural differences and of environmental differences. Giving criticism to your children versus to your siblings versus to your coworkers versus to Dharma brothers and sisters is all different, right? So you can't necessarily do it all the same way. Because if you do, out of context, you can create problems. So we need to be mindful of our environment, right? But most important is our mind. The mind stays the same, even if the actions change to meet the needs of the environment. And our mind is always about helping others. When we, the ultimate antidote to any of the eight worldly concerns is cherishing others, recognizing that having more concern for others than for yourself, developing a mind of bodhicitta, is going to tear apart all of the eight worldly concerns. If I'm more concerned with your happiness than my own, then I'm not going to act in such a way that's seeking out my own pleasure only, because I'm more focused on you. And so forth with all of these. So what I'd like to do now is spend a little time doing a meditation, and we'll do an abbreviated one today. But so then you can elaborate it in your own practice. And then we'll have time for a little bit more Q&A at the end of the practice. How's that? So what the meditation is going to be, just to give you an overview, it's not like really deep or profound, but it's on the eight worldly concerns. It's a meditation of analyzing your actions and seeing what our motivations are, right? And so it gives you a chance, it's the type of meditation you can do at the end of the day to really go through your actions. And so my inspiration for this is in the Kadamba teachings, you hear Geshe Bin, and he would, at the end of every day, he would sit with a pile of black stones and a pile of white stones, and he'd go through all of his actions for the day. And anything that was motivated by a worldly mind, he'd put a black stone in the pile. And anything that was actually motivated by a Dharma mind, and it wasn't motivated by one of the eight worldly concerns, he'd make a pile in the white stones. And at the beginning of his practice, he said there was almost only black stones and then a very few white stones. But the more he practiced, then they balanced out, until there's only white stones and no black stones. Right? So he is talked about in the teachings as an actual practice that the Kadamba geshes would do. So using that as our inspiration, I like to do this meditation. So let's start by just having a comfortable seat, whatever it may be, whether we're sitting in a chair or on a cushion. We should just feel balanced and grounded. Okay. So if you need to adjust yourself to feel nice and balanced, go ahead. I won't go through the traditional meditation posture, but if you know it, the 7-point posture of Vairocana, go ahead and adopt something similar. The important thing is to let your spine be nice and straight. Let your head be nice and relaxed where it falls naturally. Generally, we'd advise you to keep your eyes open or half open, but not focused on anything in particular. And so for a few moments, allow your awareness to follow your breath, just to calm your mind a little bit and to center your awareness. There are many external distractions, different sounds, different obstacles we have to our practice. And we can recognize those things and still let our awareness return to our breath, not judging the distractions and not judging the mind that gets distracted, but just observing it and doing our best to return our awareness to our breath as it follows its natural rhythm. Now, let's think of our actions that we've already accomplished today. Since getting up in the morning, getting out of bed, maybe washing our face, brushing our teeth. What was our motivation behind those simple actions? Did I brush my teeth because I don't want others to have a bad opinion of my stained teeth and my bad breath? What was my motivation? Was it because I didn't want to be judged by others? Or was it for something else? I made myself breakfast and had food, made myself coffee. Was I seeking out that food as pleasure and happiness? Or was it fuel for my body so I could continue practicing spiritual life? Did I cling to that idea of food, delicious food, as my happiness? Or did I appreciate whatever I was given or whatever I was able to make? So let's think in this way. Just the few activities you did this morning and analyze them, understanding the eight worldly concerns. Everything you did, was this motivated by me seeking pleasure? Was this motivated by me trying to avoid discomfort? Or was there a spiritual motivation? So we're not judging the action. We're looking at the mind that precipitated the action. So go through your morning activities, starting with getting out of bed. How many times did you hit the buzzer to wait for 10 more minutes? Even what motivated that? You chose an outfit to wear today. What motivated that choice? Was it simply because you wanted to be comfortable? Was it because you wanted others to see you and have a good opinion of you? You dealt with any family members this morning or friends as you prepared to leave to come to the center? What motivated your interactions? Were you anxious about arriving on time? Were you worried about being judged for being late? And are those worldly concerns or Dharma concerns? However, you made your way to the center this morning, whether you drove or took public transportation or walked, what minds motivated your decisions? Were you trying to find what is most comfortable? Were you only concerned with your own happiness? And then as you arrived at the center and took a seat, how much of your participation was based upon not wanting to be critiqued by others or wanting to be praised by others? Go through all of these actions you've done today. Think back on them now and say, if those actions I did that were motivated by a worldly concern were instead motivated by spiritual concern, how would that change that action, both physically and internally? So if I brushed my teeth because I didn't want my breath to smell and I didn't want to have stained teeth, if I did that because I didn't want others to critique me, that's a worldly concern. But if I did that because I didn't want to create circumstances for others to have discomfort, and I was concerned with others not having to deal with that discomfort, or if I did it because I wanted to maintain my own physical well-being and health, so I could continue to live a spiritual life, the action of brushing my teeth doesn't change, but my mind changes. So what does that change look like in my experience? Every action I've taken today, I ask myself, is this action Dharma or non-Dharma? And if it is non-Dharma, how can I change and make it Dharma? And if it is Dharma, and if you look back on your activities this morning and see actions that were free from any worldly concerns, rejoice in those Dharma activities. This isn't just about critiquing ourselves, it's about rejoicing in all of the progress we've made and setting a determination to continue to work towards virtue. So as you go through all your daily activities, you create these mental piles of black stones and white stones. So you can observe this pile of black stones, however big or small it may be, and recognizing it, commit yourself to doing better tomorrow, to not have as many worldly motivations. You're not judging yourself. You're not saying, I'm a bad person. You're not reifying your sense of self. You're just recognizing these were all worldly activities that did not bring me or others any benefit, any real benefit. So therefore, I'll do my best to avoid them in the future. And now look at the pile of white stones and say, no matter how far away I am from enlightenment, I did engage in some spiritual activity today, no matter how big or small that pile may be. And that is a reason to rejoice that I've taken a step towards Buddhahood. So in that virtuous spiritual activity, I find joy and comfort and motivation to continue engaging in spiritual life. Now with that, allow your awareness to return to the room. So you see how that practice, if you spend 10 minutes or 15 minutes in the evening, when you've actually had a whole day of activities and not just a very short morning of activities, you actually go through your activities of that day, right? So therefore, you can talk about the 8 worldly concerns and the self-cherishing mind and the self-grasping mind, not in an abstract way. Really say, what did I do today? And was it Dharma? Or was it self-cherishing? Did I move forward towards Buddhahood? Or did I create more obstacles for myself? So literally go through your day. It's really helpful. It really is. I think there are some neutral things. but many of them are not. We assume they're neutral, but if we really look at our reasoning, we find that they're probably swayed one way or the other. That's why if they are neutral, then that's fine. But then if they're neutral, we can still make them virtuous, right? So take a neutral activity, you know. So for instance, the reason, I mean, I talked about this in this session today because we didn't do many things in the morning before coming here. So the number of things to choose from was limited. But brushing your teeth seems like a neutral activity, especially we're all adults. We've been doing it every day, numerous times a day for our whole lives. So we often don't think about it, right? So maybe you're not actively like, I'm doing this because I don't want people to think bad things about me, right? Maybe you no longer have that, but it's just neutral. You're not thinking about it. It's mindless. So how can you transform that into a virtuous activity instead, right? So you can take these activities that are neutral, that are quote unquote mindless, and make them active parts of your spiritual life that are bringing you closer to Buddhahood by saying, I'm doing this not for myself, not simply because I want to maintain my body, but because I realize that by engaging in this activity, I don't disrupt others' minds or their experience, and I do preserve my body in such a way that makes it a better vehicle to continue practicing a spiritual life longer, right? Lama Zopa, there's a whole book out actually of Lama Zopa like giving like little aphorisms that you use through your day, so you can transform every one of your actions into a Dharma action. So like, so it's just something he got it like for a monk when you put on your belt, you say I'm putting on the belt of moral discipline that is containing all of my negative actions, and I'm tying myself up tight so I don't engage in non-virtue, Or when I open a door, Lama Zopa says, I'm opening the door to enlightenment and I'm closing the door on suffering, right? So these are little aphorisms that seem silly, and they seem silly to me reading through. You're like, okay. But what you're doing, even in these small things, is you're not really opening a door towards enlightenment. Like that's not physically what you're doing. But what you're doing is you're making your mind more in tune with this spiritual practice, right? So much of our life is governed by habit, habitual behavior, right? And by habits that we've created in this life and in numerous lifetimes. And so what we're trying to do is rewire our minds so all of our habits are aligned with virtue. And some of that may seem very silly, but that's because we're not used to being virtuous, right? We're not used to living a spiritual life. So whatever tools we can use to align ourselves with virtue is helpful, which is why when people have like daily aphorisms, never mind the spiritualists, never mind like from our spiritual point of view, but like, you look at the self-help kind of space, there's a thing of daily aphorisms, right? And it seems silly, but it can change your whole outlook by saying, I am a good person. I am going to engage in the world in a healthy way. Saying these things to yourself, at the moment of saying them, you may feel silly, but you're creating habits, which is really important, So even if you find that most of your actions are neutral during the day, then how can I make those actions virtuous or spiritual and not neutral, right? And they do say when you talk about the 8 worldly concerns, they use the term black activities and white activities, and there are mixed as well, And it's the same when we talk about engaging in creating negative karma or virtuous karma. It's often mixed, right? If we might have a good intention but engage in a harmful activity, or we kill insects because we don't even realize they're there, so it's mixed in some ways, or it's not a complete action. So most of our lives are in this gray space. That's true, but we always want to make it more virtuous. And I know from my own experience, the first few times I've done this meditation, it feels really childish, just for me, because I'm just not used to doing this kind of thing, and it seems so like didactic almost. You know what I mean? And I encourage you, when you feel something like that, just get over yourself, because that's what I have to do, and say, like, this teaching or versions of this come from our lineage, right? This is something that our teachers did. What Geshe Ben gave us the example of doing, and others. And if they can do it and it benefited them, it can benefit my mind, right? And like, I'm not some great practitioner that doesn't need this, And maybe doing this practice every day, you realize this isn't helpful to you. So then maybe you find this practice. It is possible. Not every disposition is made for everything, right? But don't just give up on it because it doesn't fit you right away. So for me, so many of my activities are governed by the 8 worldly concerns without needing it. Even like when I come to Bangalore to teach, the amount of energy I plan on like getting a bus ticket, getting to the bus station on time, getting here, trying to like not run myself ragged, to do all the things I have to do that involves getting from Bailakupa to here and then getting back to Bailakupa is like a lot of planning. And most of it's to make my life as easy as possible. You know what I mean? And that is all self-cherishing. It really is. Like there's so much of yesterday, I wanted to go to a few bookstores to get some books. And so I was walking from the Indira station and I went to a few bookstores. And then I thought I'd walk to my hotel, which is like 3.5 kilometers, 4 kilometers. And at this point, it was maybe 1:30 and I'm walking. And then I realized, oh, the hotel stopped serving lunch at 2. So if I walk, I won't be able to get lunch. But if I take a rickshaw, then I can get lunch. And that was my motivation for getting a rickshaw. Not a great motivation. You know what I mean?
Sensible.
It's sensible, but also if I didn't eat lunch, I wasn't going to die, you know? And like as a monk, I usually don't eat any meal afternoon anyway. So I'm used to like not to skipping a meal every day. So it was sensible. You could, but it wasn't for me. It could have been sensible, right? But at that moment, I was like, oh, I really would like some lunch right now. So it was about my pleasure. It wasn't about being like, oh, I need to have the energy to teach, blah, blah, blah. It could be. I could have done the exact same things, but it could have been a spiritual practice. But it wasn't. It made me sound like, ooh, you know, I really would like some lunch right now, right? So even in my practice of coming here, I still have these 8 characters, these 8 worldly concerns motivate almost everything I do. But luckily, I've done enough practice that I can see it. And if you can see it as it's happening, you can reverse it. If you don't see it while it's happening, but you see it at the end of the day, then it makes it easier to see it in the future, right? So that is the goal of our practice. Baby steps forward, you know?
Or you could have thought that the rickshaw driver will get more earnings, he get to sit with the monk.
Yeah, there's many ways. There are many ways that I
Or
could have.
you won't be tired when you're teaching, you'll be fresh.
There are many attitudes I could have had that would have resulted in the exact same external action, but would have been a spiritual practice, right? And that's the point. That there are many things we can do that we're not saying we have to drastically change our physical activities, especially because we have to relate to the world, whatever that may be, right? What we're saying is we change the mind behind them, and that is the revolution, right? The revolutionary action is the mind. Yeah, deeply.
I'm very food motivated and food centric in my mind is have eating disorders. And so I use dishonesty at this time. I'm admitting it. So if there was anything, and even if I had 4 hours to walk or anything, it would be, I would choose one of the things like I'm helping out this person or I'm doing, actually my motivation, I mean, indirectly, yes, I am helping out, I'm not denying, but I am comfort oriented and food oriented. For me, going to the next place of comfort and being around food is far more important than the actual thing. And yes, somebody benefits, somebody's, but the lies I tell myself are this.
Well, this is an important thing to know, right? Because we spend a lot of time lying to ourselves in this way, or not lying, but just being slightly dishonest, you know, in many ways. And for instance, the Dalai Lama has called out a lot of monks on this at a teaching in Gyumbe many years ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago. You know, from the Mahayana point of view, especially, we say, I'm working to become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings, right? And a Buddha or another highly realized being has much greater wisdom and method. Right now, I have very few things I can do to help people. So my way of helping might be very worldly only, right? And giving people worldly help isn't the same as giving them spiritual help. So therefore, I'm only going to work to become a Buddha. And the Dalai Lama once we were at a teaching, and he looked at all the monks who were at Gyumbe, and he goes, it is shameful that we look at our Christian brothers and sisters and they have food pantries and they have shelters and they do all these things to help people. And due to their faith, they do this. And we say our goal is to help others, but we don't do any of those things because we say that's only worldly benefit. It's not worth it. I'm only going to be Buddha. He's like, this is lying to yourself, right? If you have the means to help others, even if it's not ultimate help, you should do it. But we say, no, I'm going to give ultimate help in the future and I'm a Buddha, right? That's a really nice thing to say. It's an excuse to not do things now, right? So, or it can be. It isn't for everyone. It isn't for everyone, but it can be an excuse, right? So we make up excuses for ourselves all the time. We're very good at it. I excel at making excuses for myself. No, I need to watch one more YouTube video. I really do. I know it's 1 in the morning and I have to get up at 4:30 for a puja, but that's okay. You know, it's very easy to make excuses for ourselves. That's our habit. You know, we don't judge ourselves for it, but when we recognize it, then we try to change it. You know, and we're not going to change these habits overnight. That's the important thing, right? If we notice our habits, harmful habits, we're not going to be able. Okay, now that I know it, it's not. It's not that easy. You know, some of them maybe, but most of them, they take time because we've been doing it for a long time. Never mind, just in this life alone. So slowly by slowly, we combine rejoicing in any progress we make with recognizing all of those black 8 worldly Dharma concerned stones and not judging ourselves for it, but saying that isn't as beneficial as I can be. That's the important thing. We're not judging ourselves. I'm not a bad person because I engage in non-virtue or because I don't live 100% spiritual life. I'm a person living in samsara, doing the best I can do. Right? That's the important thing. And if I can do a little better tomorrow, then that's great. Okay, yeah.
I have a question about the precept of not lying.
Mhm.
What forms the basis?
The basis for a precept of non-lying is another sentient being who believes what you say to be the truth, even though you know it is not the truth. So if you say something believing it to be true and it isn't true, that's not a lie. You know, even, you know, lying depends on you believing something to be untrue and wanting another sentient being to also take that untruth as if it were true. So that's the basis.
Even if you leave out something to make it, it
Yeah.
may be actually true, but you're misrepresenting.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, it doesn't have to be explicitly saying a lie, but it's wanting someone to believe something that isn't full accurate truth. But the basis is another sentient being. Why?
Why did I ask?
No, just, you know, what
What motivated that?
Yeah.
Go. Like,
Yeah.
like,
we were talking about it yesterday, that's why I asked, is because it came up. Also, someone pointed out that you have to sometimes say little white lies, right? According to Dharma, we don't. Sometimes, according to social norms, people believe we have to. And so you have to find that balance. If your partner says, do I look fat in this dress? And you say yes, you know, what these kind of things. But it is, if it's a lie, it's not beneficial, right? So
relative.
all of our lives are relative, right? Everything is relative. So it's a matter of saying, but still, if you lie to someone in that circumstance, it's a non-virtue. Even if you're doing it because you don't want them to be insulted, you're still engaging in lies. The 10 non-virtues are always non-virtues. It's impossible to tell a lie and for it to be virtuous. That's impossible. So then, knowing that, then you, so what is the most virtuous thing I can do in this situation? And part of that is knowing the situation. And if I tell this lie, that is me engaging in non-virtue. But if I don't tell this lie, this white lie is such a dangerous term because you try to pretend that it's good. If I don't tell this, will that cause more problems and more distress? Or how can I answer the question in such a way that isn't necessarily lying, but isn't going to cause distress, right? We face these things all day long. So lying just came up yesterday. So I was wondering if that's why it came up here now as well. It's difficult. According to the Dharma, lying is always non-virtuous. The 10 non-virtues are always non-virtuous. So lying, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and so forth. You know, there's no way to engage in them and not have it be non-virtuous.
I can see the justification for lying. For instance, if you have good intention, you don't want to hurt people. There is that. However, my current understanding of why lying is bad is because I think it makes you comfortable with a false reality. Something that I could do. By saying it, you're reinforcing your belief in a false reality, probably for it doesn't matter the reason.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was hoping that
no, that's part of it, right? You are by lying, you know, one of the most insidious parts of types of karma is when you engage in a behavior, it makes it easier to engage in that behavior in the future, right? So one of the results of karma has 4 different types of results, and one is a result that's similar to its cause and habit. So when you engage in a certain action, it becomes easier to do that in the future. So when you're lying, you are trying to create a distance between true reality and experience of reality. So that is one thing. And you're also making it easier to lie more in the future. So if you say that all I'm doing is telling these mistruths about small things because I'm worried about their feelings and I'm trying to be virtuous, it becomes easier to lie about bigger and bigger things in the future because you've created a habit where you're not concerned with reality. You're concerned with your emotions, right? So you're creating a habit of harm. So we say lying is always harmful action, right? And the problem is, how can you tell the truth in a situation that they might take harm from? So how can you tell the truth in such a way that doesn't create harm? It's hard sometimes. Kabul Rinpoche says, if you know someone is being chased by a murderer and they run that way, and the murderer comes to you and says, where do they go? He says, even pointing in the other direction is lying, and you shouldn't do it. So you should just pretend you don't understand what they're saying. That's his answer, which is not a great answer. But he's like, just pretend that you don't speak their language or something. And you're like, okay. But so, even in that circumstance, he says, even though you might be saving someone's life, lying is not a valid response. And the response he gives, I don't think is particularly great. Being like, but that his point is that is how nefarious lying is and how insidious it
the
is.
easiest of all the noble issues.
That depends on person.
Yeah.
It depends on they're all to be honest, they're all pretty easy. They're all
how skilled you are.
I think lying, even white lies, are just an excuse of not facing the situation when you say that you don't come out of that.
they all these
zone
think
and
about it,
just
right?
say,
Again, if you're relating it right back to the eight worldly concerns, a white lie, when you tell a white lie, right? You might say I'm doing it because I don't want to upset them. But really, I don't want them to think badly of me. I don't want them to get upset at me. Right? Not always, but often. When someone
With children and their drawings, you have to sometimes just say, wonderful.
it would be wonderful.
but what is
It could be, but I'm saying when you're giving parameters to this is what you need to do, this is how it.
again, we can go into many specifics. That I don't think is always useful. But a good thing about lying, especially, right? If you tell quote unquote white lie, are you doing it because you don't want to hurt their feelings or you don't want them to get mad at you? And is there a difference between those two things, right? And that shows that the reason we're lying is motivated by our self-care mind. I think it not 100% of the time, but most of the time, that's what it's going to be. And now I can say from a Dharma point of view, and as a monk who represents Dharma, there's never a situation where you should lie. White lies are always non-virtuous. I can say that with 100% confidence. Now, to say that you'll be in a situation where telling a white lie may not be the easiest thing for you to do, the most skillful thing to do, that may be. It's still going to be non-virtuous. That's the important thing to remember,
Also creates a habit, right?
Oh, exactly.
Like joking. This is even joking. You don't mean it as a lie, but joking about
Yeah, no, it's very specific. We I know Alex, you had a question, but one story about joking. When Lama Zopa came to visit us in Boston once for a teaching, I was staying at the Lama Yeshe Lived Markai, which is where he was staying as well. And before he left, he was planning on, so we're in Boston, and the next stop on his tour was to go to North Carolina for like a week-long teaching in North Carolina. But they were going to go first to New York or something to try to get a visa. They're trying to get a visa to go to Mongolia or to China or something. And they had to go meet someone in person because they were trying to use whatever backdoor measures they could to get these visas. So they're like, so Roger, if you've met Roger is Lama Zopa's attendant. Like, he's the one that takes care of all the logistics. And as you can imagine, Lama Zopa does not care about logistics. Lama Zopa is all about doing the right spiritual thing. When you're living in the world, that can be very difficult. So Roger's like, has a lot of work to do. And it's their last day there. And Rinpoche is like meeting with all of us one at a time, just to give us like a last bit of advice before he leaves. And Wendy went last, Wendy Cook. And she finished and she came out. And she goes to Roger, she goes, what did she say? Oh, no. So while we were in there, while she was in there, Roger said, oh, by the way, Rinpoche did a mo, and it turns out we're not going to get the visa. So we're going to stay another 2 days. And all of us go, oh, okay. And the thing is, if you spend time serving Rinpoche like that, it's really wonderful. It's exhausting. It's very, very exhausting. Okay. And when Rinpoche is in your presence, it's easy to find the motivation to do it. But when you thought he was leaving and then he's going to stay for 2 more days, it just disrupts everything, right? So all of us go, okay. And you can see we're all like doing the math. Okay, like, what do we have to do now? And then Roger just laughed at us and he's like, I'm just fooling you. You know, he's like, we're going to go no matter what. Like, we have the schedule. So like, then Wendy comes out and she goes, oh, Rinpoche is doing a mo now. And he laughed. And she goes, no, he's really doing a mo, a divination to see if it's useful to go get these passports, these visas. And Roger's like, nope, he's not. Have to go stop him because it doesn't matter what the mo says. We're going anyway. But so Nick goes, see, that's what you get. That's what you get for lying to us. You make a joke. You thought you were being funny. This is your immediate karma repercussion is that you're making a joke by lying, right? Which is still a lie. And now, so Roger, they, regardless of what the most said, they stayed on Roger's timetable because, you know, they kind of had to do that. But you're right, even making a joke, if it's lying, you're creating a habit, which is harmful, you know? Yeah, Alice, did you have a question?
I have a follow-up question of the murder chasing someone and you believe that you don't speak the language.
Yeah.
So if I remember correctly, it may have been a very you mentioned that if the act of lying is not only materialized if you speak, but in any way create incorrect perception, then isn't you pretending that you don't speak language pretty much the exact same as pointing in a different direction?
I think it's probably still lying, but it's not quite the same because by saying I don't speak the language or by pretending not to understand their question, you aren't misleading them by saying he went that way and not that way. You know what I mean? I don't think there's a good real answer to that problem. I think that Bonka gives that as the best thing you can do in that situation, but it still is not ideal. I don't, you know, I'm not sure. It still is just being deceitful, right? It still is some level of deceit.
You can say you went that way, but you have to kill me for it.
You know, I think the point of that example is just showing that like there is in that extreme of an example, there is no good option. And even some level of deceit is still lying, right? Is what it's showing.
Yeah, it feels like that's like again like the social norms are such that we de facto lie in so many things that are considered socially normal, like slightly overplaying and inflating your achievements in a job scenario is what everybody does, and
Yeah.
it's actually what the society thinks you should do so that you get a promotion.
Yes.
Right? Or I would assume like, let's say you're living with a disease and you're not actively disclosing it to everyone because it's not a then you're actually getting, like if you're pretend so that you're healthy, then you're getting corrective section or not.
That one I'm not so sure about. Because things like that, if you are living with the disease and you cause harm to others with that disease, then that may be one thing. But if no one really has a right to you knowing what's going on with your body other than you, really, unless you are an active harm, a place where you can actively cause others to become sick or harmful. So I'm not sure about that one. But I agree that our social norms are built on lies quite often, right? And trying to not engage in those lies is difficult. And so we need to find the way to be skillful to engage in them as infrequently as possible. And whenever we do engage them, make sure it can't be virtuous. It's impossible. But at least we can try to have a good intention so it's not as heavy of a negativity, right? So when you are trying to tell the killer to not go after this person, at least you have a good intention that you don't want that person to die and you don't want the killer to accumulate the negative karma of killing, right? So you can at least have that good intention, which means it won't be purely negative, but it would still be a negative action, right? So we do our best. And with a society that's kind of built on these white lies, we do our best to avoid them when we can. And if you can't, due to your circumstance, at least try to have the right motivation to diminish them, you know? Okay, we've gone late, so I don't want to take us too much longer. It's a really strange thing to end on, but try not to lie if you can. Let's just keep it at that. Let's just do very quickly. We'll do the short dedication prayers. So just page. Yeah, let me hold on one second. Let me see how long this is. Yeah, okay, yeah, we'll just do that. We'll do 36. That's fine. The other ones are a little longer. So we've done our best to create a practice that was virtuous in 3 ways: the beginning, middle, and end. Virtuous in the beginning by setting a strong motivation. Virtuous in the middle by studying teachings of the Buddha with an open mind. And virtuous in the end by dedicating any merit we've accumulated to other sentient beings that they might experience happiness and be free from suffering, that this merit may help propel them to Buddhahood. So strongly dedicate in this way. May any merit I have accumulated be given away to others. May they experience the ripening results of that merit. May it free them from their worldly suffering, from all of samsaric suffering. May it place them in the state of Buddhahood. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel of bodhicitta that is not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Thank you so much. Just a programming update so we all know. Next 2 weeks will be teachings in person. Next week, Venerable Kaldama will be here. He'll continue with these topics. And then the week after that, I will be here. And hopefully, if our schedule goes, then that is, we'll have finished both the Saturday and Sunday courses over the next 2 weekends. The last weekend of the month, which is actually the 31st is Saturday and the 1st is September, there will be a teaching here. Venerable Gache will be coming. It'll be like a 1-day teaching. And then for the most of the month of September, we're going to take it off. At least myself and Keldon won't be able to come because we have exams at the monastery. So we're going to take that time to plan out the new schedule of what we're going to be teaching next. And that should start in October. But so it's important, if you have something that you're interested in us teaching, talk to Dipti or to Shantila, Shantiji, and we will help create a program so we know what's going to happen in October. It's not finalized yet. We're working on it now. So we have 2 more weeks in-person teachings. We'll finish these courses. 1 week of a Sunday teaching that is a one-off of whatever Venerable Gache is teaching, and then a little bit of a up in the air after that. Okay. Okay, next.
Thank you so much for coming,
Yes, thank you.
Yella, and teaching us again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And see you all next week. Thank you all for joining here.
Thank you.
And Choe Khor Sum Ling thrives on the support of all of you all. So if you are willing to help us keep the programs running, keep the center going, keep the lights on in the center, please let us know and we'll tell you how you can contribute either your time as volunteers, or if you're not able to and can support us monetarily as well, please let us know and we'll also have a discussion with you. Okay, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
All of you just wait.
Thank you all online from online.
Thank you.
See you all next time. Bye.
Please be at your place.
See, I'm switching off the recording now.